We're into the back half of the 2025 NFL season. And that's kind of sad, but it also means we get to think meaningfully about playoff football, and that's less sad. Today we're going to dive into the AFC playoff picture. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take each of the AFC playoff hopefuls. We're going to ask one question about the teams that we were asking back in the offseason. We're going to see if we got an answer to these questions throughout the beginning of the season. If we didn't and it still lingers, we'll address it. And if the question has been answered, we're going to pose a new question that'll inform how we should expect them to perform for the rest of 2025. You're watching Light Boxes, a football show that helps you think outside the box about the NFL. I'm your host, Rob Ballantine. Before we get going, it would mean the world to me if you like the video and subscribe to this channel. Doing those things helps get my content out to more NFL fans just like you. Let's talk about the AFC playoff teams. By my count, I've got 10 teams with a realistic enough chance to make the playoffs in the AFC. It's not that anyone's mathematically eliminated yet, but I'm not going to be bringing up the Jets, the Dolphins, the Browns, the Bengals, the Raiders, or the Titans, because a question that would be most relevant to them is, what does a miracle look like? Let's kick this exercise off in the AFC South with the division leader Indianapolis Colts. And for them, the question this offseason was, what would they be getting from the quarterback position? And back then, the question was centered around Anthony Richardson, going into his third year after a dismal first 2 years of his NFL career. The Richardson ship has clearly sailed, but that's fine, because their contingency plan from this offseason has worked. They signed Daniel Jones to a 1-year, $14 million deal this offseason to compete with Richardson, and Jones has performed better than even his biggest believers could have hoped. The Jones experiment has gone so well, in fact, that the Colts traded away 2 first-round picks to grab cornerback Sauce Gardner. Those are premium assets that could have been used later to find a future quarterback. So, in giving up those assets, they're signaling that they think they can get a deal done with Jones and that he's the quarterback of the future. But the fundamental question still remains. What will they be getting from the quarterback position? Because Jones has never played this well in his 7-year NFL career. Traditionally, one of the biggest weak spots in Jones's game is how he handles pressure, both failing to pick it up properly and fumbling the ball away once he gets hit. In the first 8 weeks of the season, he was playing suspiciously like a different quarterback, handling pressure easily, not really fumbling it. But in week 9 against Pittsburgh and week 10 against Atlanta, he fumbled the ball 3 times in each of those games, and you started to see semblances of the old Daniel Jones popping up. Now, to Jones's credit, he didn't let the mistakes compound on each other the way he would have back in his days with the Giants. He shook off the bad plays, got things back on track, and led them to a win over Atlanta, and they only lost by 7 to the Steelers. But before these 2 games, the Colts' offense seemed unstoppable. Aspects of it still are, most notably Jonathan Taylor. But if the Colts really want to make a deep run, Jones has to show that he can handle pressure well and keep a firm hand on the ball when the pass rush gets home. I think Indy will win the division, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are their closest competitor, and they're holding the final wildcard spot if the season ended today. A question I was asking about them in the offseason was, would they get a third defensive lineman to play up to the level of Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker? Because in 2024, those were the only 2 effective pass rushers on the team. Hines-Allen had 10.5 sacks, Walker had 8, but no other player had more than 3 on the entire roster. It meant that teams could game plan against the top 2 rushers and never feel any real threat from the rest. Veteran Eric Armstead was one of the players I cited as being a potential third threat, and he's played well, notching 5.5 sacks so far this season, which almost triples his total from last year. So the answer to my question is technically yes, but Hines-Allen and Walker themselves have taken a step back. They've only combined for another 5.5 sacks, and the defense is third lowest in the league with 15 total sacks. They've also allowed 33 plays of 20 plus yards or more, and that's a stat that sort of indicates that the pass rush isn't getting home well enough. Of course, that implicates the coverage players too, but when you're allowing that many plays deep down the field, the pass rush hasn't made a big impact. So the defense in general is a mess. The pass rush is not pulling its weight. And so while the answer is yes, it's also kind of no. So the new question to ask about the Jaguars is, will the marriage between quarterback Trevor Lawrence and head coach Liam Cohen work? Yeah, it doesn't look good right now. And we've seen a lot of quarterbacks play their best ball under Liam Cohen. When he was the OC at University of Kentucky for 1 year, he turned Will Levis into a quarterback who almost got drafted in the first round. Hell, Will Levis might have if he'd gone out into the draft right after that year instead of going back to Kentucky, playing worse with a different offensive coordinator, and then going in the top of the second round. Then his NFL career fell off a cliff. The only time he's looked good was with Cohen. Cohen also helped elevate Baker Mayfield's game even further than Dave Canales had taken it the year before. Rams head coach Sean McVay reveres Cohen's offensive mind. Yet despite all this, Lawrence looks as flawed as ever, and the offense is disjointed as a result. Sometimes the running game gets going, but that's in spite of Lawrence. Lawrence doesn't seem to be reading out concepts in the way Cohen is teaching, and he's still wildly inaccurate. Back in week 2, we saw a weird moment where Trevor Lawrence waved off Cohen's coaching from the sideline during a collapse against the Bengals. And they played nice in the media, said it was just all the, working with each other, heat of the moment bullshit, right? But they haven't gotten on the same page the whole rest of the season, and it's gotten me thinking. Liam Cohen didn't take the Jaguars head coaching job originally because he was going to have to be paired with GM Trent Baalke. And Baalke's a terrible GM, and he's known as the little finger of the NFL, where he's always in the owner's ear, and Cohen didn't want that energy, and I get that. So once the Jaguars fired Baalke, knowing it was an impediment to hiring Cohen, then Cohen got to bring in his own GM. But beyond just that, maybe Cohen didn't want to be saddled with the guy who drafted Trevor Lawrence. Now, it's not that Cohen would have taken the job if he didn't have some belief in Lawrence's talent, but maybe he was worried about some element of Lawrence not working out, and he wanted to make sure that he was taking a job where a GM with whom he was aligned could move on from Trevor Lawrence if they decided to. They didn't want to be completely handcuffed to Lawrence. It could be a factor in why Cohen didn't initially take this job. We'll have to see if Lawrence and Cohen can start to get along and start to see offense the same way. Because this year, it might not be a big deal, but over the next couple years, it's going to matter in whether Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback in Jacksonville or not. Still in the AFC South, and the Houston Texans are alive as well. And their question coming into the season was whether new OC Nick Caley could paper over the issues with a bad offensive line roster. And weeks 1 through 5, the answer to that question was a resounding no. But since week 6, the plan has started to look a little more cohesive. They've been able to pick up rushers better. They have a good plan to use short and intermediate passes to mitigate a quick rush. And just in general, the offensive line play looks less pathetic on a down-to-down basis. The Texans are 3-2 in this stretch, and the 2 losses come against 2 of the most elite defenses in the NFL, Seattle and Denver. Both of these defensive fronts have many different players who can get home, and they have 2 of the more creative coaches from a defensive perspective running those units. Even the best offensive lines have trouble blocking the Broncos and the Seahawks. The Texans' offensive plan has definitely gotten better to mitigate their weak offensive line, but that's still the lingering question, because teams going forward are going to check that Seattle tape. They're going to check that Denver tape. They're going to figure out what really worked well against the Texans, and there's nobody coming through that door as far as offensive linemen that could fix the issue. The talent is going to be what it is. It's got bottom 3 talent as far as any offensive line, and it might be the worst. So hard to say that they can fix that issue. I definitely don't have an answer yet on whether they've done the job or not. The rest of the season is going to bear that out. Let's hit the AFC West next, the other division with 3 teams still in the mix. And the Denver Broncos, they're in the lead. A lot of their wins have been ugly, but you don't apologize for wins in the NFL, and they've done what is necessary to take the driver's seat in the AFC West. The obvious offseason question for the Broncos was, how would quarterback Bo Nix develop in his second year? And I live in Colorado. I'm around a lot of people with strong opinions on both ends of the spectrum, but I'm not a Broncos fan, and I would classify myself as a Bo agnostic. There's Bo truthers, there's Bo haters. I'm right down the middle. I thought there was a solid chance he could take a good step forward in year 2, since this was going to be his first offseason with a returning offensive coordinator since high school. And that offensive coordinator was Sean Payton, no less. But unfortunately, the answer to my question is he didn't develop. He regressed. the worst of all outcomes for the Broncos. And there's not really time to fix the issues that he's put on tape with this little left in the season. At this point, Sean Payton's most realistic objective is to not progress, but get Bo Nix playing at the level he did last year, instead of reverting to his worst tendencies from back in college. This defense is playing at an elite level, and the offense is at risk of holding this defense significantly back. It's already been an issue despite the fact that they've clawed some ugly wins out. So my new version of the question for the remainder of 2025 is, can Bo Nix just be more accurate? He's shown it before. He had a solid 66.3% completion percentage in 2024, but this year it's dipped down to 61.2%, and that's a bottom 8 mark in the league among starting quarterbacks. He's got to get better, especially on deep passes. He has these consistent, agonizing overthrows all the time. Maybe we cut some of those plays out of the playbook. Maybe we run more of the intermediate dig routes across the middle that Bo does see really well, and that Courtland Sutton, their number one wide receiver, runs really well. I don't know exactly what the recipe is, but Bo has displayed an ability to have a decent completion percentage in the NFL. We got to design the playbook in a way that gets us back to that to keep the offense on schedule. Normally, accuracy is not a stat you can expect to correct quickly, but the Broncos have a chance if they use this upcoming bye week to recalibrate Bo's footwork, get him settled in a little more, and to reinstall some concepts that used to work and allowed him to be in his mid-60s completion percentage form from last year. The Los Angeles Chargers are next in the division and a wildcard team if the season ended today. And the question I asked in the offseason was whether it made sense to give Mekhi Becton, a guard, a big money deal this offseason. The talent is in there with Becton. He was the 11th overall pick in 2020. He had a really tough time finding his footing and staying healthy with the New York Jets. But then he had a breakout season last year and helped the Philadelphia Eagles win a Super Bowl. But the Eagles have the best offensive line coach in the league, arguably, in Jeff Stoutland. And was it going to make sense for the Chargers to sign a guy away who had a really good year under elite offensive line coaching, despite no previous track record of being a great player? The answer to that question is unfortunately no. Becton has not played very well, and he has not been healthy consistently. But the new question for the Chargers is whether this entire offensive line can hold up at all, because they have been a devastatingly injured unit. It's not just been Becton. Becton has played only 57% of the offensive snaps this year. But Joe Alt, who was supposed to be your right tackle, had to move over to left tackle. He hasn't been healthy. He has only played 42% of the snaps. And that's because originally the left tackle was going to be Rashawn Slater, and he played 0 snaps this season. He had an offseason injury. And so beyond that, even the other depth players have had trouble staying on the field. Jamari Salyer and Trey Pipkins have not accounted for over 65% of the snaps. So you're left with Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson playing close to 100%, and they're just not good players. You've lost all of the beef on this unit, and they just can't protect Justin Herbert, and they rarely move people in the run game. That's going to be a major issue. This defense is pretty good. It's not one of the elite units, but it's strong. And Justin Herbert is playing like an MVP caliber quarterback, but he's just completely hampered by no time in the pocket, by getting smashed so often by the defensive line. It's just not sustainable. So while I think they probably hold on to a playoff spot, it doesn't seem like this offensive line can keep them alive for very long. The Kansas City Chiefs are third in this division, and they don't have a playoff spot right now. A lot of people are shocked about it. Not a lot of people are mad about it. A question I had for the Chiefs was whether Xavier Worthy could carry the wide receiver unit going into his second year. He had been a first-round pick in 2024. He'd shown some flashes, including a really good Super Bowl performance despite losing to the Eagles. So was it Xavier Worthy time, especially with Rashee Rice suspended for the first 6 games? Now, Xavier Worthy had a rough start to the season, and it was just unfortunate that he and Travis Kelce collided on the 4th play of Week 1, and Xavier Worthy got injured on that play. So that's sad to see, but even despite that, the answer is still no. Xavier Worthy has only 1.21 yards per route run. That's the lowest mark on the Kansas City Chiefs for any player with 15 or more catches. That means Juju Smith-Schuster is above him, Tyquan Thornton's above him. Every single one of the Chiefs with 15 or more catches ranks higher. Worthy is known as a speed demon since he ran a 4.21 40-yard dash at last year's combine, breaking the combine record, but he just doesn't have the feel of when to throttle up and throttle down the way that the best speed receivers do. He's still developing that, and his size is still a significant issue. When people want him to become the new Tyreek Hill of this offense, they forget that Tyreek Hill is a much denser player. He's around 190 pounds, whereas Worthy's 165. You see him get pushed around all the time. He's not a capable run blocker. He's not consistently able to body out defenders at the catch point. And so these are big weaknesses in his game that really hold him back. Rashee Rice has come back from his suspension, and he's the number one guy. Even Travis Kelce looks a little better right now than he did last year. So Worthy isn't required to shoulder the burden for this passing game, but you'd like him to take the step commensurate with being picked in the first round the previous year. But my new question for the Kansas City Chiefs: will they commit to a run game that can balance this offense out? Because right now they have only 259 rushing attempts on the season. That's not really next to the lowest marks in the league. The Bengals only have 191, the Titans have an even 200, the Raiders have 226. But these are teams that are constantly behind, not in favorable game scripts to run the ball. Whereas the Chiefs, they haven't been on the wrong side of a blowout the entire season. And Patrick Mahomes has 48 of those rushing attempts on his own, and almost none of those are designed runs. They're scrambles on what were going to be passing plays. So when you subtract those from the 259, you're getting closer to those other teams. And those teams don't have running quarterbacks. The Bengals committee of quarterbacks they've had to deal with, they only have 19 rushing attempts between them. Cam Ward on the Titans, 21. Geno Smith on the Raiders, 34. So that's not company you want to keep. Running still doesn't quite have the same value that passing does in the NFL, but it's ticked up a lot over the last couple years. We just saw the Eagles win a Super Bowl on the back of the running game with Saquon Barkley. The Colts are where they are right now because of their offensive line run blocking plus Jonathan Taylor. Even the teams without superstar running backs, they're finding a way to run the ball and provide such important balance to their offenses. The Chiefs just don't do that, and it's really an attempts thing. They don't even try to press the issue. I get that their running backs are way worse, but they need to recommit themselves at least a little bit to the running game if they want to dig themselves out of a 5-5 hole that they found themselves in. Moving on to the AFC North, and the Pittsburgh Steelers do have a one-game lead in the division, but they are significant underdogs to the Baltimore Ravens to actually winning the division, according to most sportsbooks. And the Steelers and Ravens haven't played each other, and that's part of why the Ravens are given the benefit of the doubt. But the Steelers are 8-2 in the rivalry since the pandemic. They always have some kind of way to drag the Ravens down into their muck and get them to play a game that they're not as comfortable with. So if they can upset one or both of those matchups, then it really is anybody's game. My question for the Steelers this offseason is whether the young tackles on the right, Troy Fautanu, and most importantly on the left, Broderick Jones, could suitably protect Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers, at the age he's at with the style of play he's adopted this late into his career, he does not want to take hits. He is not willing to hang in the pocket. Now, interior pressure would be worse in general for most quarterbacks because it blows up the space in the pocket that the quarterback wants to step into. But the interior of the Steelers line is good. The problem is edge rushers get home more often. When they beat a tackle, they create more sack opportunities. And since Aaron Rodgers is unwilling to get hit, he doesn't have the mobility to escape them anyway, and he's going to throw the ball away. He is not going to extend the play and give the Steelers more chances late into the down. The answer to the question is sort of yes, sort of no. It's a bit in the middle. For this, I want to look at true pass sets, not just every pass blocking rep, because when you're taking a true pass set, it's more indicative of your technique and your efficiency. And so when the Steelers have been in those situations, Broderick Jones is the worst of the two. He's allowed 18 pressures to Fautanu's 13. And it's unfortunate because Broderick Jones is on the left side protecting Rodgers' blind side. But that's not close to the league worst. Charlie Heck has given up 27 pressures in true pass sets, and he's had fewer attempts of them. And there's plenty of players in the 20s, and Broderick Jones isn't touching that. So that's good news. And it was actually a pressure from the right side. It was Miles Murphy, Cincinnati's defensive end, going towards Fautanu that led to a hand injury for Rodgers in the last game. Now, it's his non-throwing hand, and he's questionable. He's probably going to be back for the next game. But it was actually pressure from the other direction, not at Jones, that led to that injury. So since we got an answer to that question, my new one is, can we get some receivers involved at all? We've seen a lot of this plane being built out of 13 personnel. 3 tight ends on the field, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver. But that's going to work when you have these defenses who can get bullied, like the Bengals. Darnell Washington dirted Barrett Carter and DJ Turner on the same play. So obviously that's working against weaker defenses. I do struggle to believe that they can just always run 13 personnel, especially because they don't really have a burner tight end. We see the Rams doing it, but Terrence Ferguson is a glorified wide receiver. Jonnu Smith has not been able to be that this year, and Pat Freiermuth is kind of in the middle, and then Darnell Washington is most proficient as a blocker. So I would really like to see them figure out not only how to up DK Metcalf's target share, but also get Roman Wilson involved. Calvin Austin has had too many drops, and Aaron Rodgers is clearly frustrated by that. But I think Roman Wilson is starting to figure it out, and I would like to see more of a role for him in this offense. They just need variance. It's not that the tight ends aren't working, but I do struggle to believe that it's going to be a salve against every defense, especially the ones they would see in the playoffs. Now on to those Baltimore Ravens who started 1-5 and are now 5-5. And the question I had for them was whether defensive tackle Travis Jones in a contract year could prove he was worth an extension. And it started off slow, especially when Nnamdi Madubuike went down for the rest of the season as his running mate. Travis Jones was not able to quickly pick up the slack as the linchpin of the defense from the interior. But it's gotten a lot better since the bye. He had an awesome run defense performance in the Miami game, and then he went on to have 6 pressures against Minnesota. So it's looking up for him. I would say the answer is probably yes. Not that he is going to be the anchor of the defense in total, but there are players like that. Hopefully you get Madubuike back healthy. You've got Roquan Smith as a linebacker. You've got Kyle Hamilton as a safety. You've got Nate Wiggins coming along as a cornerback. Marlon Humphrey might still have a little more time too. But he seems to be worth paying. From the interior, averaging 2.5 pressures a game is a totally solid amount. So Travis Jones is playing well and the defense is trending up. So my new question for the Ravens is, what's going on with the red zone offense? Last year, they led the league with almost 74% of their drives that entered the red zone turning into a touchdown. This year, they're in the bottom 5. Only 47.2% of their red zone drives have turned into touchdowns this year. And some of those games had Cooper Rush starting at quarterback, and Tyler Huntley, even though he did pretty well, also starting instead of Lamar Jackson. But even last game against the Cleveland Browns, only one of their 4 red zone drives ended in a touchdown. I think the main culprit is Lamar Jackson just isn't running the ball. Since returning from a hamstring, teams don't feel the threat of Lamar taking the read option himself. And so teams are able to commit more to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's actually doing fine. I think there's a bit of this storyline of Derrick Henry's having a down year, and he is to a degree, but he still scored 2 red zone touchdowns against the Bears in week 7. He's doing just fine. But because defenses can commit to him properly because they're not worried about Lamar Jackson, that's one of the big reasons. Now, Lamar is a good enough passer to be able to make it work without the threat of his legs. But it seems like some of the bigger receiving options on this team, like tight end Isaiah Likely and Rashad Bateman, wide receiver, are not quite as spry as they were last year, and then Zay Flowers is too small of a target to be a viable low red zone threat. It all comes down to Mark Andrews, and obviously his hands can be a little suspect. So everything is just the dials turned down a little bit. It's not that they're terrible, even though the numbers do put them in the bottom 5 right now for red zone efficiency. They have the capability, but none of the pieces are playing quite at the level they did last year, and those are tight margins for a team that came into the year with Super Bowl hopes and now is just really fighting to win their own division. Our last division is the AFC East, and it's being led by none other than the New England Patriots. Who'd have thought? The only division in the AFC that is currently being led by a team that was in last place in that division last year. Head coach Mike Vrabel has completely changed the culture, and quarterback Drake May has taken a massive leap in year 2, like many had hoped. My question for the Patriots from the offseason was whether any of these receiving options were going to elevate into Drake May's guy. It's not that good quarterbacks always need a number one go-to receiver, but we've seen plenty of quarterbacks take a good step forward when there's a number one guy they can lean on as plays break down, or a first read option who they trust to win so that they don't always have to read out every single progression from receiver 1 to 2 to 3. That can be taxing. It's not that we don't want them to be able to, but let's lighten the load a little bit. In the offseason, the likely candidate was going to be free agent signing Stefon Diggs, and he's been awesome. The answer to the question is a resounding yes because of Diggs. And at first, the Patriots offered Buccaneers wide receiver Chris Godwin more money than he even took with the Buccaneers. He went back to the team he was comfortable with, and it's sad to see because I love Chris Godwin. He has not been able to be healthy this year and be able to contribute to the Buccaneers. But that means the Patriots dodged a bullet because instead of getting Godwin, they settled for Diggs, who has lived up to his contract in spades. Drake May, despite not having a 300 passing yard game yet this season, he's the league leader in passing yards, and Diggs is a big part of that. So my new question for the Patriots is, can this young and unproven offensive line really hold up when the schedule gets harder? I particularly look at the left side of the line with 2 rookies, Will Campbell at left tackle, Jared Wilson at left guard. Now, Will Campbell was the 4th overall pick. He's a player I believe in immensely, but right now, he's still young in NFL terms. He's still had trouble with the league's premier pass rushers. Of course, everybody's going to have trouble with Myles Garrett. He's probably going to be the defensive player of the year. But even Will McDonald had his number in the Jets game when the Patriots already had the lead and they should just be able to lean on the running game. There were some passing situations where he got beat. And as the schedule gets harder, because we got to admit, the Patriots have had a bit of a cupcake schedule, even though they're looking like a good team. When they get into the back half of the season and then they get into the playoffs, they're going to be going against better defenses, not only that have better pass rushers in general, but also better back ends of the defense that will be sounder in coverage and allow the pass rushers to get home. So the offensive line is still a question mark for me. I hope that they can gel even further and they can come up with some good play calls that keep these guys in advantageous situations. But I'm not yet ready to just trust this unit when it's not crunch time. We've got one team left to cover, and it's the Buffalo Bills. They won the AFC East each of the last 5 years, yet now they sit 2 games behind the Patriots, and they lost to them earlier this year, so they really got to beat the Patriots later on and win out if they want to win the AFC East again. Going into the season, they had the best odds to win their own division out of all 32 teams. And so the question I was asking was simply, could they take care of business and get home field advantage? Not getting home field advantage has been a huge problem for them in the AFC playoffs. There was one year that they lost to Patrick Mahomes in their own building because Tyler Bass missed a kick, and that's unfortunate, but that was a close game. All the other times that they played the Chiefs were also close games, but those were in Arrowhead, and so you're giving a distinct advantage to your opponent by not playing on your own turf. And even if they had won that game against the Chiefs that was in Buffalo, they would have had to go on the road to Baltimore, so it's making the path harder for them. My theory on the Bills was that they were a 13-4 or 12-5 caliber team that could win the AFC East, get the 1 seed in the entire AFC, and make their path much easier. They're 7-3 right now, so those records are technically still on the table, but winning their own division is made harder by how well the Patriots have been doing. They're 2 games behind New England. They're also 2 games behind Denver and a game and a half behind Indianapolis for that AFC 1 seed. So it seems like their chances of having home field advantage through the playoffs and bolstering their chances at making a Super Bowl, those are dwindling by a ton. My new question for the Bills, though, is can Josh Allen just chill out? I haven't seen him play this frantically, this consistently since 2022. It's anecdotal, but there's just such an unease to his game right now. It seems like he's pushing for everything. The most obvious example is in the last game against the Buccaneers, the chest pass he threw from his own goal line that was picked off at their own 8 and led to a Buccaneers score. They ended up winning that game 44-32, but Josh Allen just seemed stressed the whole time, like he was hunting the big play, which was a bugaboo for him early on in his career. He needed to learn how to relax in his play style. The best stat we can use is average time to throw, and Josh Allen has an average time to throw of 3.05 seconds, which is the 6th highest in the league. He's spending the most time before he would have to throw it. But an even better stat is average time to throw when a pass was attempted, because when you take out the times the quarterback scrambled, he now has 2.81 seconds, which is the 3rd highest mark. Now, Caleb Williams is in his own stratosphere with both of these stats, and that's not necessarily where you want to be. Jalen Hurts is next, but Josh Allen is 3rd. And the reason I contrast these stats is because there's almost something comforting about just saying, F it, I'm going to run. And that was part of Josh Allen's game before. There was an ease to the fact that he would glide away from linebackers and pick up 12 yards, even though he was standing in the pocket for a while. Now there seems to be this reticence to run, and he really needs to hunt for some kind of 50-yard pass way more often than he actually needs to. So because of that, he has a higher time to throw when he actually passes it relative to the rest of the league than just his average time to throw in general. Josh Allen is still a great player. Don't get me wrong. He's gonna be just fine. But I sort of think that this is indicative of the temperament of his head coach, and teams follow the lead of their coaches, right? And especially key players, they're going to take on the attitude of their coach. Sean McDermott is also another tightly wound ball, and I just worry that he's imparting this kind of do or die mentality. We need it all right now, which doesn't make sense to me because he's a defensive coach. But I just worry the pressure of being the Bills' leader for as long as he has without making a Super Bowl, it might be starting to weigh on him. He might be pressing the issue too much, and that's carrying over to Josh Allen's play. There are plenty of Bills fans that want to try something new at head coach, and I'm starting to get on board with them. I'm worried that Sean McDermott, who, one, hasn't coordinated a great defense in a while, and two, might be causing Josh Allen to play with too much tension and stress, might be time for him to go. But McDermott's the guy for the rest of the year, no question about that. So hopefully he can take a big deep breath, pass that attitude along to the team, and we can start seeing Josh Allen play a more comfortable style of football that led to him being the MVP last year. That'll do it. That's the dive into the AFC playoff picture. I hope you found the lens through which I looked at each of these 10 teams interesting. If you enjoyed the video, it would mean everything to me if you liked it and if you subscribed to this channel. Doing these things helps the algorithm get my video out to more NFL fans just like you. This was Light Boxes. I'm Rob Ballantine. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.